WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American here in Germany, tasting rare and exotic whiskeys. Bunnahabhain, 20 years old, so vintage 2002, modeled on the 22nd of March 2023. So it is 20 years old. This is from Duncan Taylor, Scotch Whisky Limited, Sherry Cask. And on the back it says here, I'll just take out the bottle here. All right, so not bad. So it says here, in an exquisite collection of Scotland's rarest and most extraordinary whiskies, our experienced spirits team has thoroughly assessed the many thousands of casks in our warehouse and from a stack chosen only the best to bottle in this collection. Bottled in small batches, this is an exceptional whiskey for enduring occasions. Whiskey without compromise, Duncan Taylor. All right, so now this box here is just generic. So they use it for everything that they can put their little bottle into. And so I'm going to look at the label here. The first thing I see here is distilled at Bunnahabhain. Well, let's pour a little bit first, and then we'll talk for a second. So we need to give this a tiny little bit of time in the glass. All right, so distilled at Bunnahabhain, yay. Matured in oak casks. This is a single barrel. Why did they have casks? Talk about that in a second. Aged 20 years. So produced and bottled in Scotland. So we have bottled 2023. Bottle number, I have 31 of 278. Distilled 202. And cask number 383207. So it is a single cask. It's 54.3%. My conspiracy theory, and there's going to be a few, is that they took multiple casks of older Bunna and put it into one sherry cask. Now, why do I think this? Well, why else do we have an S here, matured in oak casks, on a label specially designed for this bottle? And then we have down here one single cask. Now, what am I going to compare it to? Well, I'm going to compare it to this because I want to give myself a treat. Yes. No. All right, so I have the 2022 cask strength Bunna. It is only 12 years of age, but it is 56.6%, and I can get this for half the price of that. Now, it is basically half the age, so why not only pay half the price? Now, this costs about 230 euros. Now, there are only 278 bottles of this, and so it is a very limited resource. Now, I bought this bottle myself. I bought it because I wanted to share a 20-year-old Bunna with my super fans, with the people who I do bottle share with. This was something I was very much looking forward to. All right, was. Now, the reason why I say was is I can take one sniff of this, and I go, oh, they ruined it. They put sulfur, a very strong sulfur candle into that sherry cask. I can deal with this little this little smudge of sulfur, of sulfur in my whiskey, my sherry cask, and this has like that much. All right, so this has so much sulfur in there that it ruins this whiskey for me. All right, so they took I'm going to say a very old, delicate, fascinating, maybe even 20-year-old Bunna, put it into a somewhat younger sherry cask. I don't have the feeling that they've been using sulfur for the last 20 years. That's why I don't think it's been for 20 years in a sherry cask, Duncan Taylor. And then I must really admit that I'm very disappointed with Duncan Taylor and talking through my teeth because they said here, our experienced spirits team has assessed thousands of casks and chosen only the best. Apparently your team is sulfur blind. I'm not. And many, many, many people in this world are not. You had a bad cask, and you bottled it, in my opinion, a bad cask because sulfur does not belong in my whiskey. You bottled a bad cask, and you're selling it now, at least primarily on the German market, Many Germans are blind to sulfur. Many more Germans are blind to sulfur compared to Americans. And you're hoping to, at least I have the feeling, hoping to get away with it. All right? So, my appell, first of all, on Duncan Taylor is why? Why did you bottle this as a single cask? Somebody must have noted the sulfur. Sulfur is a note that does not belong in whiskey. Full stop. Period. Explanation point. No. So, all right. I can try it, but the problem is the sulfur is so overpowering that I really, really don't have any pleasure whatsoever with this whiskey. My question of the day is, how do you deal, first question, how do you deal with the disappointment with a whiskey? So you buy a whiskey, oh, Bunna, I know how it should taste. Bunnahabhain, yay. I know how Bunnahabhain Sherry should taste. I know. I've had quite a few signature vintage sherries. Full maturation, first fill sherry, but 10 years of age, 65%. I know how Bunna and sherry interact. I've been at the distillery in Bunna. I've tried a single cask directly from a sherry cask at the warehouse. I know how it should taste. And then you offer me, or I receive after purchasing this, a bottle that is absolutely not what I expected. How do you deal with that disappointment? How do you deal with this wrong flavor profile of the bottle you expected? Especially, we're talking 230 euros here. This isn't a 30 euro bottle, it's a 230 euro bottle. Now, luckily, I did a bottle share, so I have basically 5 CL that belong to me, but everything else, someone else is going to get, and it's going to have exactly the same disappointment. And now the second question is not how do you deal with that disappointment of a bad purchase, especially with a single cask, but how do you avoid? Now, I know people who only buy, in Europe, they only buy bottles where they've actually tasted the whiskey beforehand. So they'll go to whiskey tasting, they will go to a shop that has the bottle open, they will organize and buy a sample, and if the sample's okay, then they'll buy the bottle. These are just safeguarding methods to prevent bad purchasing decisions. And I must admit, I think that's a great idea. Now, what did I do? I bought this bottle because Bunna, cask strength, Duncan Taylor, Sherry Cask. Ooh, has to be good. And guess what? It's not. Cheers. There's so much sulfur in here, in my personal perception. My tongue tingles. There's an acidity in here. It's like chewing on matchsticks. No. So, I am so disappointed. Duncan Taylor, you can do better. Right. So, not D, value for money, F. Really, really, really not what I want to have. Not in my whiskey. Sulfur does not belong in whiskey. We have copper contact to get rid of sulfur. We put sulfur candles into the sherry cask, and then they absorb the sulfur, and then pass it onto the whiskey. They bottle it, and they give us something that we do not need, something we do not want. It's worse than peat, and I don't like peat. So this is beautiful. So this is magnificent. The 2022 Bunna Cask Strength Edition. This makes me happy. This makes me sad. So, how do you deal with disappointment when you buy an expensive bottle of whiskey and it's totally different? And how do you avoid having those disappointments in the future? please write it down in the chat. I'm disappointed, and I was expecting something totally different from this 20-year-old Buna. Thank you very much for watching, liking, subscribing, telling others, and maybe complaining as well. Maybe the industry will hear if we start saying, no more sherry casks, no more sherry casks with sulfur, no more sherry casks with sulfur. That's what we should say. No more sulfur casks, no more sulfur casks. All right, that's me. Thank you very much for watching. Whiskey Jason here. Bye-bye.